It's pretty significant to understand the difference between guilt, which is I did something wrong and now I'm going to correct it, versus shame, I am something wrong and there's nothing I can do about it.
Guilt can guide you, shame will bury you. Welcome to the Dad Central Show, the podcast that helps overwhelmed dads conquer stress, build confidence, and become the father their family brags about. Join Drew Solon, a leadership coach and father of five, and Ed Gow Jr., a fatherhood advocate and contributor to the Good Men Project, as we guide you through the journey of fatherhood. We'll show you how to connect deeply with your family, manage your time and energy better, and master tools to become the dad you want to be. Let's get started. Have you ever gone to bed feeling like you're disappointed with your kids, your partner, your boss, and somehow still yourself? Well, today on the Dad Central Show, we're going to be talking about when you feel like you're failing everyone, guilt, shame, and resetting expectations. We're going to cover some areas here like the quiet inner narrative dads live with. Also, we're going to cover guilt versus shame, why the difference matters. Then also, where these expectations came from. And then finally, resetting expectations without lowering standards. Drew, how are you doing?
I'm okay, Ed. We've had a little technical difficulties trying to get set up for the recording today, so please bear with me and hopefully the sound comes through okay. But other than that, just came back from traveling to Timmins, Ontario, doing some work for fathers and an Indigenous organization, and it was a good trip. But I realized how much energy it took just to travel. I'm not gonna say it was minus 30 when I was there, but it seems the cold followed me back home because it's freezing cold here too. There's lots to think about when I engage in Indigenous communities and see some of the the intergenerational stuff that goes on, and then of course reflecting on my own journey and my own parenting and my own family and the things that we're working towards as well. So there's a lot going on as far as that, but maybe this topic will touch on some things both for me and for our listeners.
Yeah, just aside, whenever I get a chance to be around Indigenous environment, it always causes great reflection. Always great. Always again, one of the most meaningful journeys I've ever taken was going to Yellowknife a number of years ago, and it still resonates in my mind. And I get a lot of times very emotional when I think about the memories and the time I spent there. And I definitely would like to go back and spend more time with our Indigenous environment and Indigenous peoples. But that's another conversation. Well, let's get to it. So, as always, you are watching Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believe that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And don't forget, we would like to answer your questions about fatherhood during our show. So if you have any questions for us, please feel free to email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. And also make sure you follow us on YouTube and whatever podcast platforms you're listening. Please follow, comment, share, etc., etc. So let's get into our conversation topic. Again, today is when you feel like you're failing everyone, guilt, shame, and resetting expectations. And the first area we're going to chat about, or Drew's going to share about, and I may jump in, is the quiet inner narrative dads live with. What do you have to say about that, Drew?
Yeah, this is something that I remember writing an article years ago about. It was really about when you make a mistake and learning to forgive yourself. But I started it with the that critical inner voice that I certainly heard quite a bit in my fatherhood journey. And over the years and working with fathers, it's something that has become pretty evident. I just ran a free training on January 13th, and the dads who attended there, we had a simple exercise as well to evaluate, is this the voice that you hear speaking to yourself, or is this the voice? And on one side, the left side was the very self-critical, negative inner voice, like, you've messed up again, you're not going to make it, those types of things. And then the other side is, well, you're becoming the dad you want to be. There's more opportunity for you, like, and every single hand went up to the voice on the left is how I speak to myself and how what I hear. And so, I'm not sure whether that is just a function of upbringing, or just the male psyche of constantly wanting to do better, or maybe it's societal and cultural. I think all of those play an impact, but or play have an effect. But the reality is that if that is the inner voice that we have, we're actually hurting ourselves, right? And that voice deepens this sense of guilt, or even worse, shame. I think that could be quite challenging, because how we speak to ourselves has a huge impact on how we see ourselves and what we believe to be true, as well as our ability to recover, repair, which are very important pieces when it comes to relationship, as well as your ability to, I'll say, bounce back and be a little bit more resilient in the face of difficulty. Fact is, life's gonna provide some challenges, and the more resilient you are, the better you're able to work through those. And but those self-critical voices don't help. Actually, they harm you and prevent you from doing that. Anyways, those are just some of my quick thoughts. Ed.
Yeah, well, I just want to add too, one of the things I share with people is when we say something, the first person that hears it is ourself. And are we speaking sun or cloud when we're speaking to ourselves, or where dads speak to themselves? And we really have to be careful what we say, because not only are we hearing it, but our kids and our family are hearing it also. Words matter. Very, very important. And just to add what Drew is saying, like, if you if you're not speaking the right words, you can have things like withdrawal, you can get irritable, you may get angry, you may overwork. And dads rarely talk about guilt and shame, but I want to encourage, find someone qualified or even a good friend to talk about guilt and shame, because you don't want to keep it inside. So remember, unspoken shame doesn't disappear, it drives behavior. So if you're not talking about that shame, it's going to impact your behavior. Drew, anything you want to add on that?
The point you made about others around us hearing it, I think, is important. Our children are always watching, and I'm very mindful of what am I modeling for them. And I want my children to be able to lift themselves up when others won't. I want them to be able to find the courage or the strength or the resilience inside them when others won't. And so for me, I think, okay, well, if that's how I want my children to be, then I want to be able to model that too. And in order to do that, if I'm speaking out self critically all the time, my children are naturally going to pick that up, and they're going to start doing the same. That inner voice that I have will become theirs. And so that's another layer for me in terms of the importance of this. But sometimes I think the point is we're not even aware that what is going on is the guilt and the shame. And maybe that's what we'll talk about in our, I guess, we'll get to that in our next portion.
Okay, good stuff. Our next conversation piece is guilt versus shame. Why the difference matters. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, recognizing one, guilt can create some form of correction, some form of, though I recognize that I may have taken a wrong turn, or made a wrong decision, and I acknowledge that, so then I now have the opportunity to course correct. And so guilt, you could summarize this as I did something wrong. Okay, we can all live with that. We make mistakes. That's normal. It's a part of life. What matters is how do you recover from that? Whereas shame says that I am something wrong, meaning that I don't have value. I'm no good. I don't. I'm not worthy of being trusted. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of having considering myself of value. And shame ultimately causes you to hide. It causes a lot of isolation. And those are recipes for further and further mental and emotional challenges that cause us to do what you said at the beginning, withdraw and not engage in the relationships in a way that are actually meaningful either for ourselves or for others. And so it's pretty significant to understand the difference between guilt, which is I did something wrong and now I'm going to correct it, versus shame, I am something wrong and there's nothing I can do about it. Those are very powerful differences.
Nice. Just want to add on to that, reasons dads slide into shame. And Two of them are cultural pressure to provide, protect, and be emotionally present. That's a huge impact. And so many dads that I assist and work with say that cultural pressure to protect, provide, and be emotionally present is so prevalent almost all the time. And it can impact them in going into shame mode. And also measuring success by impossible standards, competition, the imposter syndrome also comes up in fatherhood. And then finally, I just want to say guilt can guide you, shame will bury you. Guilt will guide you, shame will bury you. Before we move on to the next point, Drew, is there anything you want to add on from what I just shared?
Yeah, I mean, we're taking 3 to 4 minutes to talk about this, and some of this is very deep. And so, shame can come from many different areas. But I want to encourage dads that if you're finding this resonating, that it might be worthwhile to seek some additional support around shame. If you recognize that, wow, I really am feeling a lot of shame here, that there's a root cause, there's a root of where that comes from, and that is something that can really have a negative impact. So I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to try and find some additional support if you notice that shame is something that's prevalent in your life.
All right, our next topic, where these expectations came from. Drew?
Well, maybe I'll just talk personally here. I'm not even sure. So this is an interesting conversation here that, you know, I've always been hard on myself because I had high expectations just of myself. And I don't know if that's because at an early age, like when I engaged in certain things, I started to perform pretty well. And so I felt, okay, well, then I can perform at a high level. So I should. Or if there's a lot of cultural influence, because I don't see that. I mean, I've watched sports at a high level and I've admired athletes who perform at a high level, but I can't say that I feel like I've been deeply influenced in terms of I have to achieve at those types of levels. So I'm not sure for myself where some of these being hard on myself comes from. More work for me to do, I guess. But sometimes I've heard other men that we've worked with that their father was very high achieving, and for them they always felt, well, my father achieved, so I have to achieve at a high level. Like that's just the way it goes. Others, they actually had the opposite. They had a father who was critical and told them that they weren't going to perform well. And so what they were driven by was a need to actually prove their father wrong, or to prove their family members wrong, that they could excel and they could achieve. And so they put this unrelenting pressure on themselves. So you have both the sides there. I think the reality is we're in an age where we have constant bombardment with images, and those images may represent an ideal or something that we've always aspired to, or just something that looks like appealing, and you enjoy that. And I want those things. And so that, I think, is a very challenging aspect of our world today, with these images that are constantly bombarding us. So those are just some thoughts that I have, and I'm sure you can add to this.
Yeah, I will thank you for a lot asking for addition on this. For me, I also want to add up the area about single or separated dads. They have extra layers of scrutiny and self doubt, especially if you're a single or separated dad. There's more pressure to meet those expectations. You're dealing with less resources and you're carrying the load without backup. So that can be even more of an impact on feeling guilt and shame. We recognize that, we understand that, and we put that out there that it's understood. It's understood. And I will just share that many expectations were inherited, not chosen. So if you're in that situation, you've inherited them. You don't have to choose them. You can break that cycle. Let's go to our fourth point, resetting expectations without lowering standards.
Yeah, and so establishing, I think, a reasonable expectation is important. And this is why the dad's roadmap that we have really starts with, one, knowing your value, and two, knowing yourself. And we have a reasonable goal setting exercise. We have creating a clear vision for yourself and your family. And many dads might do this professionally, like they've got visions, they've got missions, they've targets and goals. But how many will actually take the time to sit down and think, "Oh, what about for my family or for my fatherhood or for my overall health and well-being? What really does matter the most?" And I think that's where it begins for me in terms of you have to really define what enough or what matters most to you in this particular season. And so that is an important element of resetting this expectation that can help minimize guilt or shame. We also want to focus on, as we've been saying, consistency. It's not glamorous, not exciting, but being consistent, being steady, being the dad who shows up time in and time out, even through the most difficult parts of life, is really what ultimately matters the most, as opposed to the sort of short-term, immediate outcomes. Right? I talked at the end of last year about writing my goals down, and my goal was I want to write all my goals every day till the end of 2025. I was close. I didn't quite hit every single day, but you know, there is an important shift that comes from that consistency of just choosing to write every day, and I felt the difference as opposed to feeling like, well, I have to hit this target number and all those other things that sometimes push us to put additional pressures that may not be as viable. So, and then of course, what truly can you control? I remember working with a grad student years ago, and he had this simple concept when he was supporting the women's soccer team, happened to win the national championship that year, where he talked about this simple concept of what is the circle of control? Like what's inside the circle that you can control and what's outside of it. And everything outside of it, you have to let go. And that I think is, for me and through my life, I've recognized a real issue because many times not being able to control those things that are outside of that circle of control caused me great stress. And I would try and push and press. And that once I learned to let go of that was very freeing. So I think those are important steps to be able to make some of these adjustments. Focus on the controllables, that last piece.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what Drew has shared about having a simple leadership frame. Presence more than perfection, repair more than performance, and direction more than speed. So presence more important than perfection, repair more important than performance, and then finally direction more than speed. So our last point here is moving from shame back to leadership. Drew, I know you love your leadership thing, so this is right in your wheelhouse.
Well, I think it's easier said than done,
Oh
and
yeah.
shame work is obviously deep work, but we can give you some starting points to get the momentum going. And so, when you do recognize that you're feeling ashamed or something, you want to name it. It's a simple process as opposed to hiding it. The reality is, shame wants you to hide it, but the more you name it with a trusted individual, could be a counselor, could be a therapist, could be your spouse, could be somebody who is going to hold that in confidence and is not going to judge you, not going to ridicule, not going to make it worse for you. They're actually going to come alongside you and support you in acknowledging that, because that's a very courageous, brave thing to do, and you're showing real strength when you do that. So we want to encourage you to name it instead of hiding it. And then this is the ongoing challenge, I think, for most people, but particularly dads, is you want to learn to regulate these emotions. Guilt and shame are big emotions. They're deep, they're powerful. And we want to learn to regulate those, taking care of ourselves before we start, I'm going to say reacting, because that's really what goes on if we haven't taken care of those emotions first. And ultimately, it's much better to have a small daily goal and try and achieve it for 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row than having big, huge, massive shifts that you need to make. Focus on the small, doable, easy wins and just keep hitting those. And that's going to help you begin to build more momentum and make better progress.
That's an
What about
excellent
you, Ed?
quote.
How
That's
can
an
you wrap
excellent
this up for
close, Drew.
people?
Yeah, that's good. That's good, really good. So as we close, let's do a little recap. We talked about the quiet inner narrative dads live with. We also spoke about guilt versus shame, why the difference matters. Then it was where these expectations came from. We hit on resetting expectations without lowering standards, and then moving from shame back to leadership. And just some key takeaways from our conversation today. Feeling like you're failing often comes from unrealistic expectations. Also, guilt can be useful, shame is destructive. Then resetting expectations doesn't mean lowering standards. And then finally, presence, repair, and consistency matter more than perfection. So, Drew, what is our resource for our family today?
Well, our dad mentor, the father leader community, is our specific resource. I believe, when this podcast publishes, it will have reopened or be close to reopening. And it's a place where you can come and connect with other dads, get direction, get guidance, get support, where you can know that the work that you're doing really matters and have clear, practical steps to engage in the fatherhood in the way that you want to. So, yeah, Dad Mentor, our father leader community.
Excellent. I just want to close with this quick message for everyone watching or listening to this. You want when you're feeling like you're failing, it's a signal. It's not a verdict. So let me repeat that again because that was a little choppy. Feeling like you're failing is a signal. It's not a verdict. Like I always say, failure is a moment. It's not a person. And then you can reset without quitting. And then finally, your kids don't need a flawless dad. They need a returning one. I love that. A returning dad. So as always, like to say thank you for taking the most important thing, your time to watch or listen to us. As always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll chat with you soon. Take care.